Okay, I am the great-granddaughter, well, let me start first of all. The East Otisfield store, or the Pugleyville store, which that area was referred to, had a number of people in it. We're really going to talk about 3 of the storekeepers who had substantially long periods of time there. But there, there is a litany of people who own stores both there and across the road. There was a store there as early. Well, we should change the. Okay. East Otisfield, Pugleyville. The store we're talking about is that building there.
It doesn't have the addition at that point.
Right. Just this single building. There was a house beside the store, and I'm not sure if that was the one that was there when Ellis Stone was there, but that was domicile Ellis R. Stone's son, Harry Stone, and his wife lived in that house beside the store, beside Harry's parents. The other features you can see here are the Kemp's sawmill that was there at the mill pond, and we've got other pictures where you see across the road here great piles of raw logs that have been brought in to be floated into the mill pond and down the sluice into the sawmill. And that mill has been gone for a long time. I think it was in the 40s that the last evidence of that mill burned.
I think it burned, Kelly.
What's that?
I think I heard my father say that burned.
Yeah, it did. It did. And I think it's a little hard to get the perspective here, but one of these buildings up in here would be the Ed Lamb house.
Martin Wiley told me once that there were 3 buildings there and they burned, and those that are there are.
It doesn't look right because the Ed Lamb house sits back further up in the field, and then the little bungalow that was the Kemp brothers' bungalow, and then Mabel Pico lived there, and then ultimately now Damon's lived there. That was Kemp's brother building that they had when they also had the mill. But that perspective doesn't look right, so that's helpful. Okay, so this is the site we're talking about, and the Bean Road goes up through there. And there was another store earlier, and it probably was on the other side of the road. Jimmy agrees that it probably was there. My dad said that there used to be one on the opposite side of the Bean Road, on that corner where Dave McBetty lives.
Well, maybe that's where it was. It was a Wardwell store.
Yeah, Zachariah Wardwell, and it was there as early as 1865.
Yep.
Then the store we're going to talk about is this one, and that appeared there prior to 1895, and it was purchased by Ellis Ronaldo Stone, who is indeed my great-grandfather, and my sister's great-grandfather. She made that there. She gets to claim it too. And he bought that store from a Stephen D. Gilson, who was very much around that part of Pugleyville at the time. He owned the mill at one time. He owned a lot of the property around there, and he was the one that sold it to Ellis Ronaldo Stone. Ellis Ronaldo Stone had 3 children. Our grandfather, Harry Stone, Luella Stone, his daughter, who moved to Portland early on when she married, and another son, Alfred Stone, who died rather young, probably in his 40s or so. And that's who my dad is named after. That was his Uncle Ellis. So there are lots of Ellises floating around. So Ellis ran that store from 1895 until 1922, at which point he moved to Portland to be with his daughter. And we'll take a look at, here's the store. That's E.R. Stone, it says on the sign. And this is actually E.R. Stone who's going up the steps. That's a picture of Ellis R. Stone. great-grandpa, and his wife, Callie Stone, Carolyn. But her nickname was Callie, and I inherited both. So that's the couple that was there. I'm going to go back, because that's a little later on. So they were there until 1922. They moved to Portland, and they both died in 1924. So that was the end of their legacy. And then there was a person there, that Russell Dowling. I think they came from Skowhegan, who bought the store from Ellis Stone.
No,
No?
that was lot later.
We have 1947.
That my father sold that to Rollins.
Oh, he went after?
Yes,
Okay.
quite a bit after.
Well, it was after Chester. So he was 1922 to 1947, your dad?
He bought it from Stone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Until 47.
Yes,
Only
okay.
26 years.
Okay. He must have bought it from Stone before that. Your father bought it from, your father bought it in 1922? That's the information we have. I think that's pretty sure.
We have the
Yeah.
deed, yeah.
Now, we got the deed. It was 1922, and then he sold it, according to this, to Russell Dowling in 1947. And at which time he moved to the store in Oxford.
No,
Your
he
dad.
moved to the farm, to the Spiller place. It was a then home, but then where my sister Ruth and Jack Watson lived,
Yeah,
which we called the farm.
right.
They moved up there
2
for
years.
2 years,
Yeah.
and then he bought the store in Oxford.
It was the Lord's store.
Yes.
And that, when you come from Oxford by the post office, you look straight ahead instead of making the corner. Most of you remember that the store set right there, along with the post office, which
Yes.
was beside it. Okay. Then in 1949,
So that's-
David and Respa Bean bought the store.
Advance the slide.
And I'm not sure who put the addition on, if that was David and Resper or that was your family. Okay, so this addition, you can see the old frame and then the addition to the side. A better look at the house beside the store where Harry and Delia Stone and my dad lived and my Uncle Phil. And they ran the store until they sold it to Connie Butler. And I don't have the exact date of
I
that.
don't know the year either.
Okay. And so Connie ran it for a while, maybe a couple of years. Then Ginny Bean Noble's brother Norman, he's not here tonight, is he?
No.
He had the store for a while, fairly short time. Then a cousin, Judy
Judy and
Bean,
Calvin bought it then.
and Calvin Hunter bought it from Norman, and they ran it for a couple of years, and that was 1961 and 1963 to 1963, at which point Judy had her first baby, and that was the end of Judy in the store. So then, then it went back to David and Respa for a bit.
Yes.
And then after David died, Respa Bean, his wife, sold it to the Grant family. And the Grants were the last people to own the store as a store. Then I think it sat vacant for a little while, and the only other activity that we know of that took place there was the East Otisfield Free Baptist Church started a, what do you call it, a thrift store. And it didn't go very long, as far as we can tell. That was in 1980. And so they made the effort to start that, but I think it was quite a lot of work. And
Let me see the pictures.
okay, that's earlier than the previous one, isn't it? So this is, that's Ellis Stone's, and then it goes to that one. And then it really goes back and goes ahead to that one. And that's C.E. Lamb on that one.
We still got that.
And
Still have that sign.
my father extended the platform,
Yes,
and the other, there was another picture.
so longer platform, and then it goes,
Those telephone.
okay, that was my, all right. Now I'm going to stop right there for a minute and go back to the stores and just tell you a little bit, and I hope, because we have two of Chester and Ola's offspring here, Rita and Madeline. And we have Virginia Bean, Noble, here for that era. And I can tell you what my dad told me about the Ellis Stone store. So let's go back to 1895 when Ellis Stone opened the store that he bought from Stephen Gilson. Of course, at that point in time, there was no electricity. There wasn't electricity in Otisfield until 1927. So there was no refrigerator. So that affected what they could sell. There was no running water either in that building. There was a building across the road that had a well, and they would go across the road and lug water with buckets and take it back and carry it up the stairs to the second floor where Callie and Ellis lived and use it for their household use. And I don't think there was a lot of water they were using regularly in the store. Of course, there were no gas pumps, as my dad told us in some notes we had from him, that there were no gas pumps because horses don't really require gas. So that was the reason for that. And then sometime during that period of 1895 to 1922, the Kemp brothers and Ed Lamb together dug a well out to the Lamb property, and then they had water at the store via gravity feed. So after that point, and I'm not just sure when that was, they had water. They sold about everything according to my dad's notes, but meat. They couldn't keep meat because they didn't have refrigeration and it just wasn't doable. But they did the usual things I'm not going to repeat because I think of all of these stores, pretty much, they still had some of the very similar things, like the crackers and cheese and molasses and all of that. And I don't know really about what kind of other supplies, but they must have had because that was the supplying store for the East Otisfield area. We do know that Ellis Stone drove his horse and wagon. In one of the notes it said to Lewiston every day. Well, from my house to the old Peck's building is 21 miles. So if you think a horse was going to do that winter and summer every day, I think that's a little off. But I think they were going to the rail stations, and I think where they probably went is the Oxford station.
Danville was another.
Was that?
Danville was another.
Danville Junction, yeah. But the closest would have had to have been Oxford, I would think. So they had to get grain, and we'll get some of these. I'm going to turn this over to people who can fill in some of these holes in a little bit. So that was horse and wagon days. The horses could be parked outside, and so it went. Probably quite a lot of work to run a store in those years. Then in 1922, when we moved Chester Lamb, Chester and Ola had 3 daughters. 2 of them are here, Rita and Madeline. And Ruth is not, but she's around still and probably could tell us a lot of things. And Alice Bean, another familiar name, Richard Bean's mother, was a little older than you, correct? And she talks about in her notes that she used to like to come upstairs and play with you girls when she was at the store sometime.
Alice Bean.
Alice Lamb Bean.
Well, she was my father's youngest sister.
Yes.
She worked in the store.
Yeah. They said she started when she was 12 years old, working in the store or thereabouts. That store also had the similar items, except they did sell meat. And I don't know at what point they got electricity, clearly in 1927. But we didn't see much of refrigerators, electric refrigerators, until after World War II.
They had one at Scribner Hill.
Yeah.
That's how I know when they got electricity.
Yeah. So anyway, they were able to keep meat via whether it's through electricity or ice. Sold meat, grain for animals, candy, clothes, shoes, gas for cars then, because we had cars. They did indeed have a switchboard that looked something like that. And the notes we had from Alice said that the children liked to play with the equipment. So I don't know if you children played with the equipment or not, but that's...
children with the operators.
And I don't know that I was born in 42, so I don't remember much about the switchboard that early, but I do remember it when RESPA was pending it in the David Bean store. And we had the old wooden box in the front hall, and the little bracket you hung, and you picked up the receiver and held it to your ear, cranked the thing, and Vesper Bean would ask who you wanted, and I would say Grammy. Well, she knew who Grammy was, so she would connect us. The two phones got connected. There were lots of multi-party lines, up to eight people on one line, so being able to know what was going on in town was pretty easy. People picked up when the phone rang, no matter who it rang for. And it was a series of a few longs and a few shorts and whatever. So that was, and then how many cell phones are there in the room today? So times they are a-changing, or did change. I whispered to Madeline when we were talking about the post office. There really wasn't a post office at Otisfield, although some of our notes say there was. But Madeline explained that the postman from Oxford would drop mail off. People could put mail in the box, in a box. A box.
Yes, it was just mail to go.
Yep.
And there was a box behind where the phone was.
Yep.
And people would put their mail in it if they missed. He delivered over, and then he would go up the Bean Road, and when he came back, he'd pick the mail up and take it to the post.
Yeah. Yeah. So, there was a postal service, we'll say, not a post
You
office.
could get a letter mail in the afternoon if you didn't have it in your mailbox in the morning.
Sounds like it worked. In terms of people working in the store, Alice talked about waiting on customers, delivering groceries in a Model T Ford. She would deliver groceries, and maybe some of the others of you did too, to places like some of the camps that were starting to develop, the Powhatan camp that's now Seeds of Peace. Great Oaks was going then. She said that there was not store service up on Oak Hill, and also South Otisfield was without a close store. So they would deliver from the East Otisfield store to those other places.
When we were young and working there, then people would call in an order, and we put it in a box because we had it in the back of a truck,
Yeah.
so we couldn't have a paper bag. And then they would call their order in, and then we'd have other boxes of what we called extras, so that they could look in those boxes and something they wanted they could buy.
Kind of a store on wheels.
And we would go to all
Yeah.
of them.
Well, one of the things Gina Ethel interviewed Alice and Judy Bean Hunter, and Alice said that she delivered up on Oak Hill, and she said her car didn't have particularly good brakes. And so if you all know Oak Hill, that's not a very good idea. So the other thing that amused me about Alice's notes was it probably, I'm guessing, might have been during Prohibition. She said that they sold vanilla, which has a rather high alcohol content. And so when they saw a certain person who remains unnamed coming, they would hide the vanilla under the cupboard so that he wouldn't need to buy quite so much vanilla.
The real vanilla was under the cupboard, under the counter, and the sterno, because the town drunks would come in, and that's what they wanted.
Very good. Yeah. But it was during your dad's time that the walk-in cooler arrived for that. Really probably made life a lot easier for keeping food. So I'll let you fill in. The other story I loved about their time in the store was how they dealt with molasses. Everything came in barrels. A barrel of molasses, a barrel of crackers, a big wheel of cheese that you cut off in pound hunks or however much people wanted. And there's two stories. One, someone suggested it was Frank Bean that this happened to, and my dad said it was Phil Stone.
No, we're not allowed to tell these.
No, this is about molasses.
Okay, the last is
I don't have the story I'm not to tell. Trust me, I know. But whoever this was, whether it was my Uncle Phil or whether it was Frank Bean, they came sort of unprepared to to get molasses. They were supposed to bring their jug and they forgot it. So Alice proceeded to pour it into a paper bag. Now, I don't know how much they got home. So that was a story I loved. So the other thing I think we have to recognize about these stores is probably true of all of them, was that they were social centers for the people around. And it seemed to be the men that got to gather around the old wood stove in the back, the big old wood stove in the back of the store. And they had checkers, they could play checkers. They had a spittoon. They had popcorn. And they apparently could help themselves to cheese and crackers to some extent. And so that was a gathering place. People talked politics, they talked about the news, they talked about the war, it was just a place where people could go. And there were some people there quite regularly, at least the East Otisfield store. So a gathering place it was. Then I'm going to move on to the David Bean store.